the frustration many of you may feel at this moment, and in particular, the frustration you may feel towards the schedules the district has imposed. When the planning team for this informational session first saw those schedules, all of us were upset, and all of us knew that our expertise and knowledge as professionals was not at all considered by the district. There seems to be some confusion about if we agree to the schedules that the district decided on. We want to be clear that the bargaining team tried to get the district to move away from them, and they refused. Legally, we do not have a right to negotiate schedules, only the impacts. This is why the schedules are not in our tentative agreement, and they will not be voted on by us. The issues with the schedules are not a bargaining issue, it's an organizing issue. And voting down these agreements will not fix the schedules. We will be discussing in our breakout rooms later collective actions we can take to address the schedules, including a car caravan scheduled for this weekend. But now more than ever, we must remain in solidarity around our tentative agreement and all the protections they offer us as we head back to the school buildings. This is just a stepping stone that will help us succeed moving forward. As we move into the summer, we must begin planning for how we win an acceptable contract for next school year and beyond. Our union bargaining team has provided us with a strong TA that is a model for the rest of California and the nation. And now we will go into some of the highlights of the MOU on hybrid learning. We will start by hearing from Darcy Chan Blackburn, who is a member of the bargaining team for the elementary division.
Hello, everyone. My name's Darcy Chan Blackburn. I teach at Sheridan Elementary School, first grade, and I've been on the bargaining team, I think, 15 years. So let's review what we've covered in this MOU and who it applies to. As many of you are aware, the district has reported that schools will be returning to in-person instruction in 2 waves, waves 1 and 2. Yesterday, however, the district presented more information on additional schools that have been identified for return. We do not have details about when those schools will open, and any questions about those dates would best be answered by the district. Here's what we know about waves 1 and 2. Here is the list of sites set to return in each wave. This MOU applies to educators and school workers who will be working at these sites from the date of reopening, which the district has announced is April 12th, to go through the end of the school year. Next slide, please. In addition to the sites listed in the previous slide, special day classes for all grades, including grades 6 through 12, will also be returning. County schools are also set to return, as well as early education schools. Next slide, please. We spent a lot of time going back and forth with the district over the instructional day schedules. We presented numerous schedule proposals to the district that we believe were better for students and staff. However, they asserted their right to only bargain over the impacts of the schedule. That being the case, we made every effort possible to push them in a direction that would improve their schedules. By focusing on the impacts, we were able to make some improvements to their schedules. The details of those schedules will be discussed in the breakout groups, specifically in early education, special education, and elementary schools breakout groups. You will also have the opportunity to ask questions about the schedules in those groups. Next slide, please. Now let's move into the highlights of the MOU in relation to the workday. The schedules will have defined start times for both in-person and distance learning. These times are also impacted by bus schedules, so the actual bell schedules are still being worked out by the district. There are no defined start times per site yet. As soon as we have that information, we will make sure to inform staff at those sites. Another highlight from this MOU is that teachers will retain students on their roster for this school year. There was a lot of information circulating about the possibility of having to split cohorts, and after many exchanges, we were able to come to agreement that students would remain with their teacher of record, and therefore teachers would not have to have split grade levels or new students on their roster. There was also a proposal from the district that would have increased class sizes. We are happy to report that class sizes as defined by our collective bargaining agreement will be maintained. 120 minutes of distance instruction will be provided daily, except for Wednesday, when there will be a shorter school day for students. The shorter school day for students will allow teachers to have a bit more prep time that day, and you will have 3 options of where to work from on those days. You may be able to work from your classroom. You may be assigned to work at a space at another site, or you will be allowed to work from home from the remainder of the workday, because it is a partial school day. And for early education side, I think someone needs to. And for early education site, each person class will consist of no more than 16 individuals, counting both adults and students on schedule prior to pandemic closures. Next slide, please. A little more information on prep time. You will have 15 minutes between transition from in-distance to in-person, and then again back to in-person. So it's 135 minutes on Wednesday as well, since it's a partial school day. And if you work in a special day class, you will have 90 minutes a day. This also goes along with the schedules, will be explained further in the breakout groups. The next slide, we're going to understand a little bit more about the workday. Let's talk about how we'll be staffing student groups. So special education paras working in person will be assigned to work with up to 3 stable groups per day, but no more than 6 stable groups per week. And Article 15, it says any person working with more than 1 stable group can request enhanced PPE. We will go into a bit more detail on what that PPE will be later in the presentation, but if you request it, you get it. As a side note, but worth mentioning, paras will also be allowed 1 hour per week to attend meetings to plan for how to support students with IEPs. Temporary transfers. We're still not sure the exact number of students and staff who will be returning. So in the event that more staff is needed at an open site, it may be necessary to call on staff from sites that will remain closed to provide support. Paras, nurses, elementary ed staff who are asked to step in may be temporarily transferred from an assignment at a closed site to an open school site. That assignment will be temporary and you will return to your previous site the next school year. Another factor in helping to maintain stable groups is the ability to bring in substitute teachers to cover in-person instruction for educators who may need to remain in distance learning. Subs may volunteer to co-teach if a teacher of record is granted a medical accommodation to work distance only. The teacher of record will retain responsibility for lesson plans, assignments, distance instruction, grades, and parent conferences. So now I'm going to pass it off to Brittany.
Hi, my name is Brittany O'Connor. I am a school psychologist and I work at James Lick Middle School. I'm also the UBC rep for school psychologists and on the SPED committee. So RSP services will be provided. This is Article 7, SPED, and it's discussing RSP. So services will be provided virtually or in a pull-out model unless a student's IEP specified push-in. Push-in must be provided in accordance with health guidelines. Group sessions will include students from only 1 stable group. Teachers will have access to vaccines. Teachers with access to vaccines can interact with cross-group students in a pull-out model. Okay. Work areas will be equipped with plexiglass barriers and additional PPE when needed. And providers will have time to clean between sessions and can choose to use outdoor workstations. IEP assessments can be done at school sites in accordance with the SPED assessment agreement. Meaning the room should look like the room at the SPED assessment center. Classes will be for SPED SDC. This is still Article 7. Moving on to SDC. Classes will be stable groups that maintain contractual class sizes. The number of adults will be limited to what allows 6 feet of distance between them in the space. The distance will try to provide enough materials so that students won't share. The district and para-educators will provide instruction to both in-person students and those learning distantly, but not at the same time. Classes with certain ratios of students in distance and in-person groups can request a sub or additional paraeducator to support these duties. Mainstreaming into general education shall happen virtually, unless in early ed, which must follow health guidelines. And then Article 7, SPED case management. All special education teachers are case managers. All IEP meetings shall be held virtually. Case managers shall be released from meetings the 4 days prior to in-person return, and if needed, be able to request a sub to allow them to update required documents. Special education services will continue to be prioritized in the master scheduling. So make sure that happens. And then paraeducators required by their supervisor to attend IEP meetings will be paid their regular hourly rate to attend. Student IEP service minutes should remain the same unless changed by the IEP team. Now I'm going to pass it off to Patricia.
Thank you. My name is Patricia Ross, and I am a special ed para at Leola Havard, and also a after-school teacher at San Miguel. I am talking about Article 8. Now I'm going to cover a few highlights that applies to many other staff at sites not yet mentioned: psychologists, counselors, social workers, nurses, TSA teachers, and paras. Teachers, librarians, behaviors analysts, and interim teachers. This group of educators will be provided with workstations that comply with health and safety measures. Those workstations will be fitted with plexiglass barriers where needed. Itinerant teachers will provide in-person services unless it is appropriate to provide such services virtually. School librarians will remain closed. Teacher librarians will work in person and will be providing with cleaning supplies, procedures for book handling. Nurses may volunteer to work as COVID-19 mitigation nurses. And if there are not enough volunteer nurses, will be assigned by reverse seniority. COVID-19 mitigation workers consist of administering vaccines and tests, conducting health assessments, and responding to individuals who show symptoms of COVID at sites. Other job duties will be modified in coordination with administration. Next slide, please. Article 9. The district will try to offer OST programs for students at open sites. Paras and subs can volunteer work in available OST classrooms if there are not enough OST teachers and subs to staff at all the classrooms. Article 10, please. Next slide. Or Article 12, my apology. Before anyone returns to in-person learning, you will be provided with 2 weeks notice. You will be granted access to your classroom 2 weeks prior to reopening date. And you will have 4 days of prep. Teachers for curriculum and instructions will support by providing students with asynchronous lessons during these 4 days. Now I'm going to pass it off to
I'm sorry, I have one. So 2 weeks notice.
Yes,
Sorry, we're going to take questions after the section. We'll announce when we're taking questions. Thank you.
thank you, Cassandra.
Yes, of course.
Now I'm going to pass it off to Kathy.
Thanks, Patricia. I'm Kathy Melvin. I'm at Lowell High School. And so we're going to do the next slide, which is training. Before the start of hybrid learning and before unit members are allowed on district premises, during the unit members' contractual work hours will be trained on physical distancing guidelines, proper use of PPE, COVID prevention plans, and any other training required by the California Department of Public Health, San Francisco Department of Public Health, or Cal OSHA. Next slide, please. Physical distancing in our classrooms. So at no point are people from the same household, people not from the same household will always remain 6 feet apart, as in the health and safety agreement. If this distance cannot be maintained for whatever reasons, educators will be given additional PPE. Extracurricular activities and large gatherings will be suspended during this time, and all staff meetings and gatherings will have to have a virtual option. Next, please. Within the classroom, the teacher and student desks will be 6 feet apart. Student chairs will be 6 feet apart, and shared student tables may have students' chairs placed 4 feet apart, only with the addition of a plexiglass barrier. Now I'm going to hand it off to Chris. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Garza. I'm a 7th grade ELA teacher at Everett Middle School. So we're going to start here with PPE. There's been a lot of questions around what PPE staff will receive. There's a standard set of PPE items all will have access to. And then there are certain staff, based on the nature of their role, that will have the option to request enhanced PPE. If you are working in one of these areas, you'll be provided enhanced PPE upon request. If you're assigned to more than one stable group of students, if your duties require you to have close contact with students, or if your duties might expose you to bodily fluids, or where face coverings may pose a barrier for pedagogical or developmental reasons. The types of PPE that will be offered include disposable gloves and gowns, masks with transparent panels, plexiglass barriers, fitted N95 or KN95 respirators, face shields, and drapes. Next slide, please. If you, this one is around medical accommodations, and there's been some questions that came up earlier as well. This touches on that. If you or someone in your household belongs to a group with an increased risk for severe illness from COVID-19, you can qualify for a medical accommodation and will be allowed to work remotely without loss of pay. Teachers in this group will still be responsible for lesson plans, grading, assignments, parent conferences, etc., and will be assigned to work with a substitute who will co-teach with you. USF will be following up with the district this week to make sure they send out information soon on how to apply for this accommodation. Next slide, please. As far as quarantining, there are clear protocols we have to follow so we continue to provide instruction to our students. If you have been exposed to COVID, or if you're displaying COVID-19 symptoms, you will be allowed to work remotely if medically able to do so. If you're not well enough to work from home, then you must use sick time. Additionally, in-person students will return to distance learning until the end of your quarantine, unless the students can continue in person, in which case a substitute will be assigned. Next slide, please. So we've reviewed a lot of information that's in the agreement, and now I want to talk about what didn't end up in the agreement. The district brought us quite a few bad proposals that we took a stand against, and some of those things include what you see here on the chart. The district's plan on the left side, the district's plan for reopening schools would have harmed students by, and then on the right side, UESF has won an agreement that supports students by. So the first one here, the district's plan would have harmed students by increasing class sizes by adding as many as 11 students to each class at grades TK to 3. UASF won an agreement that maintains small class sizes of 22 students at grades TK to 3. The district's plan would have increased the use of combo classes, i.e. split grade level. UESF won an agreement that prevents the creation of new combo classes. The district's plan would harm students by separating students from their current teachers and assigning them to one or more teachers who have no history of working with them. USF won an agreement that keeps both in-person and distance-only students with their current teacher who have worked with them since the beginning of the school year and know their strengths and weaknesses. The district's plan would have harmed students by assigning teachers to teach new grade levels with a generic one-size-fits-all curriculum. UASF won an agreement that keeps teachers at their current grade level with curriculum they have prepared based on the needs of their students. Next slide, please. A few more highlights here. The district's plan would have provided no additional support for special education students who are struggling with distance learning. UASF won an agreement that provides students in special day classes with a co-teacher or additional para-educator to support both in-person and distance learning students. The district's plan for reopening would have harmed students by putting the health of students at risk by exposing them to more adults from outside their stable group. USF's agreement protects students by placing clear limits on interactions with adults who are not part of their stable group. And then finally, the district's plan for reopening schools would have harmed students by diminishing instruction for distance-only students by assigning them to larger classes with teachers who don't know them using generic curriculum. USF won an agreement that supports students in distance learning by keeping them with their current teacher and providing at least 120 minutes of live instruction each day from their classroom teacher and specialist teachers, including music, art, PE, STEM, and English learner support. So it's because of our organizing and commitment that we were able to keep many of these harmful proposals out of this MOU and do our best to reach an agreement that supports our staff and students. This MOU, as you can see here, is set to expire in June of 2021, this June, and is only meant to guide us through the end of this school year. We will soon be negotiating a new MOU to determine what the fall looks like. On that note, I want to emphasize a couple of things about this MOU. Once this agreement is ratified, we will have the right to file grievances if the district is not holding up its end of the agreement. And your rights as a UBC, according to Article 23 of the Collective Bargaining Agreement, our contract, are also still in place. Lastly, if we notice that things aren't working in practice, then we can use these real-life examples to advocate to change them for the fall. It won't just be theory at that point, and we'll be able to clearly prove that some of the things the district insisted on just aren't working in real life and that changes need to be made. Next slide, please. As far as the ratification process here, as a reminder, later tonight, we are going to be ratifying both this agreement and the health and safety agreement that we went over earlier. This is the second of 3 informational meetings. At the end of the 3rd meeting tonight, we're going to email out a link with instructions about how voting will work. The voting link will be live from 10 p.m. today on Wednesday through Saturday at 12 p.m. Please encourage everyone at your sites to vote this week so we can hear their voices. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Eddie. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Because this affects you, we are asking you to ratify these agreements. We recognize that these agreements are not perfect. For some of you, this process feels rushed, and for others, it is coming too late. The bargaining team is confident that this is a good agreement, and we strongly encourage you to support it. I would like to briefly go over what will happen if we do not stand in solidarity and ratify the TAs. Next slide, please. A yes vote from the majority of members means we return with clear safety standards in place, clear protections to file grievances if agreement is violated. SFUSD and UESF can return to the table to make adjustments to the MOU if needed. We have a starting point and practical information about in-person teaching during the pandemic for new negotiations around learning in the fall. A no vote from the majority of members means we still have to return, but there's no guarantee with an agreement in place. There's no way to file grievances or pursue other actions if agreements are violated. Protections gained in this TA or MOU may be lost in a new negotiation process. Voting yes or no on these agreements does not change the schedules that the district has decided on. School schedules are set by the district, not at the bargaining table. UESF made suggestions, but did not get to set the schedule, and the district was not required to use a UESF approved schedule. Additionally, I want to review a few questions and answers as they relate to ratification. What happens if the tentative agreements are not ratified? In the event that the tentative agreements are not ratified, SFUSD can file an unfair labor practice charge against UESF for bargaining in bad faith. There are no guarantees that any of the protections we have bargained, many of which are tied to public health agency guidelines, would be enacted. If the agreements are not ratified, do we still have to go back to school? Yes, you would still return to school, but potentially with no protections in place. We would also have no way to file a grievance or pursue other actions if the agreements are violated. If we vote no on this agreement, would that change the current schedules? No, voting no on this agreement will not change the current schedules that the district created. We can only negotiate the impacts of the schedule, not the schedules themselves. The district gets to set the schedules. Concerns about the schedules can be addressed not through bargaining, but through organizing, and we encourage members to join our member-led efforts that we will be discussing today in breakout rooms. Some additional questions. Can you go back to that slide real quick? Thank you. Is the district providing childcare for educators with school-age children not attending in person? The district is not providing childcare, but the Parks and Recreation Department is offering space in community hubs for the children of essential workers, including educators. What happens if San Francisco returns to the purple tier? As long as the agreement is ratified and in place, the unions will not return to the bargaining table. The unions will return to the bargaining table. There are so many other things our educators, students, and families need. Why aren't those things in this agreement? California law specifies the subjects that districts are required to bargain with unions. The union can bring up other subjects not required by law, but the district is not obliged to bargain them. You just heard a lot about why voting yes matters and what the impacts would be if the agreements don't pass. There's also a link here to the full FAQ for you to review as well. Now I'm going to hand it off to Sean to walk us through the hybrid learning Q&A.